Celebrating her 50th year of religious life, it was the culmination, or perhaps still the onset, of the realization and self-fulfillment of a dream of then 19-year-old girl from one of the seaside town of northern Luzon, so far removed from the hustle and bustle of citified life. Yet, it was the hub of religious activities and education, as it was then only the town along the coastal region that has a sectarian religious institution. The Sacred Heart of Mary's institution, now St. Paul's School of Apari, was the site where the dream was hatched and born through the moral and spiritual guidance of the Sisters of St. Paul de Char. It was here where she studied from grade school up to the time she decided to enter the nunnery. It was here in this institution where she observed and nurtured the kind of life she would choose. There was no one in the family who insinuated that she would become a nun. So the family thought it was all a joke when she would sometimes hinted her desire to enter the nunnery. They came to know she was dead serious when she requested that she be accompanied to Ilagan Isabela for initial interview by a Franciscan nun. Accompanied by her brother, they went to St. Ferdinand College in Ilagan. Unknown to her family, she had been communicating with a priest, asking questions about religious life and her chances of becoming a nun. Not long after the interview in Ilagan, she left for the Little Flower Novitiate. She was accompanied by her sister and brother. What was surprising was that there was none of the usual reluctant opposition that frequently prevailed among family members when this idea of entering the cloistered, semi-regimented religious life was ever discussed. Even his soldier brother-in-law, when informed of her decision, readily consented by saying, "If that is what she wants, let it be." Was she broken-hearted? Was she frustrated about love? Definitely not. Rather, she left behind two ardent admirers who were her high school classmates. One was not too far away from the church patio where she bade goodbye to the town's parish priest and some St. Paul sisters prior to her going to the airport to board the plane for Lawag City on her way to Baguio. There were no tearful farewells. She finally was brought to the novitiate house by her brother and sister after a one-day tour of the city. Thereafter, Virginia Naval was given the religious name Agnetia, chosen from three names to select from, a name her brother jokingly said sounded more like milk of magnesia. With her indomitable spirit and lifelong ambition and decision to enter and accept the religious life, she persevered and kept on during her trying years of novitiate life until she and her companions who entered the nunnery received their perpetual vows. She was sent to school to continue her studies at the University of Santo Tomas, where she took up nursing. She graduated and successfully passed the board examination for nurses. Later on, continuing her studies, she took her master's at the University of the Philippines, where she finished her degree and successfully defended her thesis. After that, she was hired as hospital administrator and dean of the School of Nursing of Pine City Educational Center at Baguio City. She spent 12 years of the best of her religious life at the Pine City. While there, she continued her graduate studies at St. Louis University, where she finished and successfully defended her dissertation for her Doctor of Philosophy degree. While at the Pine City Educational Center, she spearheaded, with the assistance of other Baguio nurses, the acquisition of a lot at the heart of the city where the Philippine Nurses Association building is presently standing. This with the gracious and benevolent generosity of the then City Mayor Luis Lardizabal. She was later on elected as officer of the Philippine Nurses Association for Northern Luzon. After her 12-year stint at the Pine City Educational Center, she was appointed as member of the Board of Examiners for Nurses at the Professional Regulation Commission. She was also given several awards from other nursing schools where she was requested to talk about the nursing profession and as member of PRC. In 1985 and up to the present, she was appointed also as Philippine representative of the Liliane Funds, a non-government organization based at the Netherlands solely for the rehabilitation of children with disabilities. Aside from representing the Philippines, she is also representing Vietnam. All these works she undertook was in furtherance of her religious life for the services of the Lord. It was a self-realization of the life she chose from other options she would have selected, given the opportunity to embark and sally forth into the world to find a suitable place for her under the sun. But the call to religious life was just too strong and convincing that other options were just discarded. The Lord's call was too big and strong a challenge that she could not ignore. Indeed, 50 years of religious life was the self-actualization and realization of that dream of a 19-year-old girl who was still barely out of her teens and at the threshold of her young life where other choices were open. But as the poetic line goes, young in years but in judgment old, she made a decision which a person of much mature age was expected to make. It was a decision not expected from a teenage girl who would still be fancy-free, as she was still then fresh from finishing a 2-year course in college. But then God's call was convincingly stronger than any other life's options that could not be denied. As a fitting conclusion to this tribute, it is very relevant to quote a portion of that unforgettable Ernest Henley's poem, "I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul." As she approaches the peak of her religious life to the service to the Almighty and humanity, the then 19-year-old girl and now an adult who spent the best years of life in the sacred cloister of the nunnery, far removed from the external reality of the world, perhaps her search for the fulfillment of her moral and spiritual life has been aptly satisfied. And so life must go on. Another 50 years? Perhaps. Only God knows.